What is going on, everyone? Phil here for KO Gaming. And few games of recent memory had as tumultuous of a launch as Street Fighter V did back in mid-February 2016. Not really for the reasons that maybe you would think. When you're thinking of fighting game, maybe the game was broken, maybe the game was unbalanced. No. The problem with Street Fighter V is that the game devs at Capcom decided to do something a little different and actually cater the game solely for a hardcore fan base. Meaning, at launch, there were very few game modes available in the game outside of just a one-on-one online competitive mode. In fact, the game lacked any kind of a classic ladder mode or arcade-style mode, no real story besides a story mode for each character that only showed a few frames of hand-drawn artwork and some really pathetic single-round fights with almost no challenge to them whatsoever. And it didn't even have online lobbies at launch, which is just a huge no-no for a game that previously had this huge community of players that got together and kind of, really raised the bar when it came to what a community can do for a fighting game with the release of Street Fighter IV back in 2009. So when Street Fighter V was released bare bones, people were up in arms. How could Capcom charge $60 for a game that doesn't have anywhere near as much content as its main rival and competitor, NetherRealm, who in the past several years has released games such as Mortal Kombat 9 and 10, as well as the Injustice series, all of which have long story modes, character-driven arcs, all kinds of optional side modes and content, all at launch. And because of that, Capcom took a bunch of criticism, controversy, and flack for releasing a game for a full retail price that didn't seem to have the content of all of its competitors. Well, it was announced that sometime in the future, they would finally be releasing a full cinematic story mode. Now that's good news because Capcom has never actually had a coherent story in a Street Fighter game, typically just leaving it to a few seconds worth of a quick cutscene or single frames of animation after beating the classic arcade mode that was not present in Street Fighter V, then getting the word that we were finally going to get a real full-fledged story mode was kind of a complete 180 for Capcom. So, over the past weekend, it was released and I had the chance to play through the story mode of Street Fighter V. Was it any good? Let's take a look together. So first, let's talk about the actual story of the cinematic story mode in Street Fighter V. It's an interesting balance. In a lot of ways, it touches upon these long-running plot lines in the Street Fighter franchise, such as the classic rivalry between Ryu and Ken, or the quest of Chun-Li and Guile working for Interpol to shut down Bison and his evil Shadowloo organization. That's tied in with a new plot line where Bison is trying to take over the world by using these satellites, and then later on there's a whole other kind of a weird thing that's tied into it. And it kind of is passable. It's a typical dictator trying to take over the world style story. We've seen it before, and it was hilarious because during my playthrough, I actually made direct reference that the plot is kind of similar to that of the movie Ghostbusters 2, and a lot of people watching were referencing Sonic Adventure 2, and it just doesn't seem to do anything original or interesting. It really is really cliche, and in a lot of ways, it's over the top. Also, there just isn't enough of a balance between the characters. Some characters seem to massively overstay their welcome, such as Karen, who for some reason is one of the main heroes of the game. She even forms her own group of fighters to try to take down Bison, and she actually has more fights than anyone else in the entire story mode. I don't understand why. Or Fong, who's the new one of the big four generals of the Shadowloo organization, but his acting and character are so obnoxious and absolutely over the top. This guy loses every fight, yet he's back and he's back. Does he ever lose? Does he ever go away? He never fucking goes away. He overstays his welcome and becomes so overbearing to the story, you're gonna hate him by the end. Now compare that with a character like Birdie, who, if you didn't actually play his individual story mode in Street Fighter V before you played this longer cinematic one, you have absolutely no idea why he no longer works for Bison, why he's siding with Karen, and why he's with the heroes. There's just not enough information given there, and there shouldn't be a prerequisite of you to play another mode in order to understand the story. By far, for me, the most disappointing character of all is Nikali. This character was supposed to be an enigma, an evil demon-like character who only comes back to Earth every few thousand years when apparently there's some kind of a summoning of warriors and something really important happening, and he fights these warriors and absorbs the soul energy. Who is he? Why does he absorb the soul energy? What's the point? Guess what? None of that is explained whatsoever. In fact, if you deleted Nikali from the story mode of Street Fighter V, it wouldn't affect anything at all. He's literally just thrown in to get him wedged in there and say that every character was in the story. It's obvious that the writers of this story don't know anything else about him and didn't want to elaborate on his story at this time. It really was very, very lame and out of place, and if anything, it's the most disappointing thing about all of the character stories in this mode. Now, one major criticism I have to lend on the story mode is that the director decided to do insane amounts of jump cuts. Now, I'm not one to say that I'm some kind of a movie director and I know better than anyone else, but this mode was all over the place. Sometimes the loading would take longer than the actual scene that would take place just to jump to another character, then jump to the other part of the globe, and then jump between scenes so quickly that it was actually hard to coherently keep track of what was going on, especially if, God forbid, you sneeze or you have to take a piss during this story mode. You're going to be completely lost. I don't understand why they jumped around so much, and it certainly is one strong negative. But it certainly isn't all negative, and I'll be honest with everyone, as a longtime fan of Street Fighter, I actually appreciated the fact that there finally is a coherent story in one of these games, and that they were trying to tie everyone's plot lines together. It certainly wasn't the best story. There was a lot of groanable, cringeworthy moments during the campaign, like, did you ever want to know how strong Zangief's chest hair is, and how many things can bounce off of it? Now you're gonna find out in the story. You know, come on, I mean, it's kind of silly, but in the same regard, I'm just happy that it exists. We've never had anything like this before. The fact that Capcom didn't charge anything additional for it, certainly it's a welcome addition, and I did enjoy finally getting to play through a story for once. But now we've got to leave the actual story of this new mode and talk about the core gameplay aspect, the combat. And unfortunately, this is what most people on the internet are crazy abuzz about right now when it comes to Street Fighter V. The combat of the story mode is terrible. Literally no effort was put into any of the combat of the cinematic story mode in Street Fighter V. 95% of the fights that you're going to have, the computer-controlled opponent will stand there like a drooling zombie while you wail upon it mercilessly. It doesn't even attempt to block or move out of the way. It's an utter joke. In addition, Capcom decided to make all of the story mode fights only a single round. So in the case of some of these characters who maybe you're getting to play for the first time, especially if you haven't bought all the DLC characters yet, or in the case of Urien or Jury, they're not even released yet, you're not going to get any kind of satisfaction out of the combat because it's over before you know it. You literally will wait longer for it to load than you'll be in the fight itself. And even if you try to take your time, it won't matter. They're going to lose their health so quickly because they're not defending. These matches are over before they even start. It's literally a waste of your time, and I don't understand why Capcom couldn't be bothered to do something more similarly to what NetherRealm did, making it a legit 2 out of 3 fight as if it were a standard competitive fight against a human, and actually putting in some kind of competitive AI. Does it need to be top level, tournament level AI? No, but at least put something in there so it puts up a fight, and maybe you can learn a few little fundamentals with each character that you're playing with in the game. I mean, you get to play as every single character, so why not actually get to play a decent match? I don't know what they were going for. Now, on the end of the story mode, I have to give the flip side review, because the final 5 fights, the AI ramps it up so ridiculously that it reads your button inputs and blatantly cheats the game engine. Allow me to explain what I mean. Now, those who've played through Street Fighter V's existing survival mode are gonna know what I mean when I say the final opponents in story mode read your button inputs. What this means is that the game doesn't have any kind of true reactionary AI where it has to see what's happening on screen like a human in order to react, but instead it actually reads your input through your controller and has a programmed response. For example, there's one fight where Zangief is fighting one of the dolls. If you're not aware, the dolls are the brainwashed assassin squad of m.bison. It was cool because this was the very first game where you actually saw all of them in combative action, and I'm wondering if they're actually going to add them as DLC characters in the future. But I digress. There is a fight between Zangief and one of these dolls. This doll is literally programmed. that every time Zangief inputs a spinning piledriver motion, that it will jump out of it. There's no way you can actually catch this character with a spinning piledriver because every time you go for it, she jumps out of it. It's absolutely laughable because the spinning piledriver is a key and integral part of Zangief's gameplay style, but it's completely nerfed because the computer cheats and instantly reacts to your button input when a human would never be able to do that in a real competitive match. In addition, the AI abuses the rules of the game. For example, during one of the fights versus m.bison, I was fighting him, he walked forward and then did a head stomp. Now, for those who aren't too versatile in the move and listings of Street Fighter V, m.bison's head stomp requires you to charge down on your gamepad for 2 seconds, then press upwards plus a button in order for it to activate. There's no way you can walk forward and then instantly go into the move at all. The game basically cheats its own rule set in order to become artificially difficult at the end. It's completely unfair, and quite honestly, it's the easy way out. Capcom put absolutely zero effort into the gameplay of the story mode of Street Fighter V. It's either insanely, incredibly simple, where there's a drooling idiot who gets pummeled upon and you're going to be disappointed how quickly the fight ends, or it's going to completely cheat and read your inputs and abuse its own rules to make it artificially hard. It's bullshit. If they were going to wait 4 to 4.5 months to put out this mode, they could have put some damned effort into the gameplay. This is absolutely inexcusable for someone who's very interested in this mode and then ends up finding out how bad it is when it comes to the gameplay mechanics. In addition to all of that, the fights are completely lopsided. Some characters, as I've already mentioned, Karen, will get many fights in the story mode through upwards of 3 or 4, while other characters like Chun-li only gets 1. I mean, Chun-li is a staple character in the Street Fighter franchise. She only fights once during the entire cinematic story mode campaign. I don't get it. That kind of baffles me. There was no balance or any thought put into, gee, let's try to make it even so every character gets the same amount of games. And the problem is that some of the characters, again, who aren't released yet or are new DLC characters, barely get any fights in. Balrog only gets 1. So it's not even fair if you're trying to get a taste of characters and decide if you want to buy them yourself or not. It doesn't even serve that purpose. So again, I gotta kind of leave myself scratching my head. What the hell was the director of this story mode thinking when choosing the frequency of fights and who would get more while others would get less? Now, it begs the question, why would someone who maybe isn't interested in the story of Street Fighter V and only cares about the competitive aspects of the game want to play this cinematic story mode? Well, upon the first completion of the story mode, you will receive 30,000 fight points. It then unlocks a hard version of that story mode by which all of the computer-controlled opponents are using that incredibly cheating button input reading AI, making it gruelingly difficult to get through, and if you get through that one, you'll actually unlock 50,000 fight points. For those who don't know, fight points are the in-game currency of Street Fighter V that allow you to unlock DLC characters, stages, additional outfits and colors without actually spending any real-world money. So if anyone's looking for 80,000 additional fight points, which is almost enough to buy an entire character, it's probably going to be worth your time to play through the awful gameplay of this mode twice to get it over with. But I'll be honest with everyone, the fact that it's so gruelingly difficult to get past this cheating AI, I don't know if it's actually worth the trouble to go through it a second time. You're gonna be ripping your hair out of your head for 50,000 fight points. I guess that's gonna be up to you to judge. And so, is the cinematic story mode of Street Fighter V any good? It's not terrible, it's certainly not the worst thing ever, but at the same time, it was not worth a 4.5 month wait, and Capcom could have put way more effort into this, especially with the absolutely terrible gameplay that's included. In fact, the most notable thing that happens during the entire story mode of this game is that you actually get to fight an elderly Brazilian cop named Peter. He takes insane amounts of damage, and you basically become a criminal when you fight him. The fight is absolutely ridiculously silly. It makes no sense, and it's just so out of place for the Street Fighter universe, you're probably going to bust a gut laughing when you actually see it. So, I'm happy that Street Fighter V finally got an official story. It's obvious that Capcom is desperately now trying to sell more copies of the game because so many mainstream gamers who aren't into the competitive aspect of Street Fighter V skipped the game, leading to record low sales numbers for a mainstream Street Fighter release. They didn't even get close to trying to get what kind of sales they were expecting, and they're so far under Street Fighter 4's performance at this point. It's really silly. I doubt that anyone who isn't already playing the game is going to run out there and try to buy this game at this point. So adding in this content is kind of just trying to fulfill their promises from back in February rather than doing any kind of actual sales strategy. It is what it is. I'm happy it exists. I hope that Capcom has learned their lesson and that in the future they will realize they can no longer just sell a subpar product that does not have the same kind of quality and content as their main competitors just because it says Capcom or Street Fighter on the front of the package. It doesn't fly anymore. In 2016, when we pay $60, we want the same content that we get from buying your competitors' games. No more excuses, and hopefully Capcom does learn from this experience. The story mode of Street Fighter V is laughable. It's hilarious, it's a joke, it's buggy, it's stupid, the gameplay is not very good, but at least it exists. It's a starting point for Capcom to build upon and hopefully in the future do better. Let's hope that they did learn from their mistake this time and that we can see better stuff in future iterations of this franchise. Alright everyone, that is it for my thoughts and review on the Street Fighter V Cinematic Story Mode. Hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please spread the word so that other people can check it out, as well as check out the description of the video where you can find things such as a link to my raw playthrough of the story mode of Street Fighter V over on my gameplay channel DSP Gaming, as well as my Amazon Associates link, and a link to my Patreon. Thanks a lot everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time here on KO Gaming.